In January 1848, a carpenter named James Marshall found gold in a California riverbed. Within months, the world went mad. By 1849, hundreds of thousands of people were racing to California from every corner of the globe. They came from New York and New Orleans, from China and Chile, from Ireland and Italy. They were called the 49ers, and they transformed a tiny settlement of 200 people into a roaring city of 30,000 in less than 2 years. In this video, I use modern AI tools to reconstruct San Francisco during the wildest years in American urban history, when fortunes were made and lost overnight, when the rules of civilization simply did not apply. Arriving by ship through the Golden Gate in 1850 was unlike anything these travelers had experienced. The bay was choked with vessels, hundreds of ships at anchor, many of them abandoned. As your ship approached the waterfront, you would see a city of tents and wooden shacks climbing the hills, smoke rising from countless fires, and crowds of men in muddy boots rushing in every direction. This was not a city. It was a fever dream built on gold. Deals were made where news spread and makeshift businesses. This was where deals were made, where news spread and where men gambled away in one night what they had spent months digging from the earth. The gambling houses operated 24 hours a day. The El Dorado, the Veranda, the Parker House. These names promised fortune, but usually delivered ruin. Professional gamblers sat at tables piled with gold dust and nuggets, taking money from miners too drunk or too hopeful to know better. A man could walk in with a year's worth of gold and walk out with nothing but the clothes on his back. Down at the waterfront, something strange had happened. Hundreds of ships sat abandoned in the harbour, their crews having deserted for the gold fields. Enterprising San Franciscans dragged these ships onto the mudflats and converted them into warehouses, hotels, and even a jail. The Niantic became a famous storeship, its hull filled with goods for sale. Walking through San Francisco, you might step from a muddy street into a building that was once a ship that had sailed around Cape Horn. If Portsmouth Square was wild, the Barbary Coast was lawless. This waterfront district earned a reputation as the most dangerous neighborhood in America, a place where murder was common, and the police rarely ventured. The Barbary Coast was lined with dance halls, brothels, and deadfall saloons, bars where the drinks were drugged and the customers robbed. Sailors were particularly vulnerable. A practice called Shanghaiing was so common it gave us the word. Men were drugged, kidnapped and sold to ship captains desperate for crew. A sailor might wake up days later, already at sea, forced to work a voyage that could last years. The women of the Barbary Coast came from around the world, many of them lured by false promises or sold outright. French, Mexican, Chinese, American. They worked in conditions ranging from relative luxury to horrific exploitation. Some became wealthy madams. Most did not survive long. The Barbary Coast was freedom for some and hell for many, the shadow side of the gold rush dream. The gold that built San Francisco came from the Sierra Nevada foothills, a hard journey east from the city. By 1850, the easy gold was already gone. The nuggets lying in stream beds had been snatched up by the first arrivals. What remained required backbreaking labor. Miners stood in freezing rivers for hours, swirling pans of gravel, hoping for a glint of color. They dug tunnels into hillsides. They built elaborate sluice systems. Most found barely enough to survive. A lucky few struck it rich. The rest went home broken or never went home at all. Chinese immigrants formed a significant part of the mining workforce, often working claims that white miners had abandoned as unprofitable. They faced violence and discrimination, taxed unfairly and excluded from the richest areas. Yet they persisted, building communities that would become the foundation of San Francisco's Chinatown. The gold fields were democratic in theory, brutal in practice. Your background meant nothing, only luck and labor mattered. But the same men who dreamed of equality had no problem driving out Mexicans, Chinese, and Native Americans when gold was at stake. Not everyone who got rich in the gold rush dug for gold. The smartest fortunes were made selling shovels, not swinging them. Levi Strauss arrived in San Francisco in 1853 with rolls of canvas fabric. He intended to make tents, but miners needed pants that would not fall apart. His solution, reinforced with copper rivets, became Levi's jeans. Domingo Ghirardelli came to sell supplies to miners and ended up founding a chocolate empire. These men understood that the real gold was in the pockets of the miners, not the ground. On Nob Hill, a new aristocracy was rising. Men who had arrived penniless just years before now built mansions that rivaled European palaces. They called themselves the Bonanza Kings, the Big Four, names that would shape California for generations. Their wealth was staggering, and their taste was often questionable, mixing every architectural style into gaudy displays of new money. San Francisco society was upside down. A man's past did not matter. Education meant nothing. Family connections were worthless. All that counted was what you had now. Former criminals became respected businessmen. Former slaves became property owners. It was chaos, but for some, it was opportunity. San Francisco burned. It burned 6 times between 1849 and 1851, each fire more devastating than the last. The city was built of wood and canvas, heated by open flames and filled with careless men. Fire was inevitable. The Great Fire of May 1851 destroyed over 2,000 buildings and caused $30 million in damage. Eyewitnesses describe walls of flames sweeping through entire blocks in minutes. The wooden sidewalks burned like fuses, spreading fire faster than men could run. But San Francisco refused to die. After each fire, the city rebuilt immediately, often on top of the ashes before they had cooled. Buildings went up in days. Entire neighborhoods were reconstructed in weeks. This was not resilience born of careful planning, but of desperate greed. There was money to be made, and nothing, not even fire, would stop it. The repeated fires did eventually teach some lessons. Brick buildings began to replace wooden ones. Fire companies organized, though they spent as much time fighting each other as fighting flames. San Francisco was slowly becoming permanent, though the next great test would not come until 1906. By the late 1850s, the easy gold was gone and the rush was over. The population stabilized. The tent cities became real neighborhoods. The gambling halls gave way to banks and theaters. San Francisco was becoming a real city. But what a strange city it was. Built by people from everywhere and nowhere, shaped by greed and hope in equal measure. The gold rush had compressed a century of urban development into a single decade. Streets that were mud paths in 1848 were lined with brick buildings by 1858. Men who arrived with nothing owned mansions on the hill. The legacy of those wild years is still visible today. The sourdough bread that miners ate because it was the only kind that would rise in the damp climate became a San Francisco signature. The Chinatown built by excluded miners became the oldest in North America. The tradition of reinvention, of coming to California to become someone new, started here in the mud and gold dust. Standing here, looking back at these scenes, it is remarkable how much was built so fast by people who had no plan, no order, and no guarantee of tomorrow. They came for gold, but built a city. They dreamed of getting rich and going home, but most stayed and made California what it is. If there's another city or moment in time you'd like to see reconstructed, let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching.